Thank you everyone for joining us. My name is Faustine Chan. I'm the Business Innovation Manager for BB Serving the Pacific Southwest. This is our webinar series that we have been holding daily webinars, building trust in trying times. All these webinars are being recorded, so if you do miss any part of it or if you like to share it with other people, the link will be available on events.bbcommunity.org, and you can also sign up for additional webinars and also view past webinars on that page as well. So we have two great, fantastic speakers today to talk about corporate social responsibility. We have Brian O'Malley. He has over 18 years of experience in public relations, and he's honed his craft as a communicator, event planner, and community connector in places and situations most can only dream of. He's led communication strategy and media relations and community engagement efforts for clients in a wide variety of industries, including healthcare, energy, banking, and insurance, and nonprofits. He's also an avid traveler and dedicates his time to Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation in support of his friend's child with type 1 diabetes. We also have Ray Artigue. He has spent his entire career in practice of marketing communications. He's owned and managed 3 marketing and public relations agencies spanning over 35 years. He's a graduate from Arizona State University, earning a Bachelor's of Science from the Cronkite School of Journalism. And he's also earned the award of a Hall of Fame award from the ASU College of Public Programs and also from the Cronkite School. So please welcome both of our speakers today.
Thank you for having us. Advance the slide here if I can. No, it's not letting me. Go ahead, Ray.
Well, thanks, Faustine, and Brian and I have been looking forward to presenting on this topic, one that we're passionate about. Why? Because we really believe in the tenets and the principles of corporate social responsibility, and we've seen with our own 2 eyes over the years how it can literally move the needle for business, and thus the subject line about being a game changer, because it truly can be. I would just tack on to those kind individual introductions that Faustine made and say that Brian and I comprise the emerging public relations and corporate affairs department with Highnoon, full service marketing communications agency with incredible capabilities, strategy, branding, all things digital, and certainly traditional capabilities like advertising and public relations. And as we'll touch on, as we go along here, public relations, though it's thought of principally having to do with media relations and publicity, it really entails so many other things. A lot of spokes in the public relations wheel, not the least of which is CSR, as we'll refer to it, the abbreviation for corporate social responsibility. So why don't we start with some definitions? What is CSR all about? It's not necessarily something, and Brian and I acknowledge this, that business owners or business operators think about throughout any normal business week. It may be a term that's not even fully known to everyone in business. We're assuming that those that are participating in this webinar are familiar with it to one extent or another, or you wouldn't be participating today. But we feel as though the definition is important because it's foundational for all the programming that comes about. So, it's all about a self-regulating business function or activity that literally helps a company be socially accountable to all of its stakeholders, including itself. And that self-regulating part is really important because this isn't being mandated by some city, state, or federal government. These are inside-out kinds of initiatives that are launched by a company because they believe in what it is they're setting out to do. It aligns with their core values. And so self-created, self-regulated, and it's through these programs that a result is produced largely to help others, to benefit society, while at the same time, enhancing a company's brand and reputation. So there's, at least those two benefits that come about from CSR programming. Sorry. All right, something we like to call these, CSR pretenders. There's nothing on this list that isn't a good thing in and of itself, but we call them pretenders because they can sound like CSR activities. They start to glance at the subject, but they don't truly rise up to the standard and the real definition, as we just talked about, of what CSR programming is. It's not CSR programs are not about writing a check to a very worthy agency, like the United Way. We love the United Way. There's a lot of organizations, March of Dimes, American Cancer Society, that help. However, that is not something that allows a company to align themselves with their core business purpose and to activate their employee base in a way that creates meaningful, heartfelt activity. It's not a one-time project. It's great to go out on the weekend and pick up trash or paint a home or plant a tree. We've all done that. We should continue to do that when we have opportunities, but not to be mistaken for CSR programming. It's definitely not the pet project of the CEO or the CEO's spouse, as I've sometimes seen. It's great that they may be interested in saving elephant tusks or rescuing pandas in some country on the other side of the globe, but again, that doesn't have anything to do, nor is it sustainable and ongoing with a company's core mission and purpose. It's more of a pet project. Serving on boards, we've all done that. We all should do that. Different nonprofit boards or civic and economic organizations. That is something that is individual volunteerism, and certainly is something that is important to do, but again, does not typically include the depth and breadth of a company and their employees. Though, Brian, there are some examples where we've seen activation in this regard where it is effective and company-wide.
Right, and I was going to jump in and say on any of these bullet points, thing to keep in mind is, like Ray said, none of them are a bad thing, but within each one of these, there are specific things that you can do, within a corporate social responsibility plan. So if you're writing a check to the United Way, maybe that's toward a specific program, youth development that is STEM related to advance the workforce that would help your core business, or like a one-time project. Again, that could fall within the volunteer side of things, where it's you have your volunteer structure and they're helping out a group that does kind of align with your business practices or your core business to help them out. Again, the pet project of the CEO, we'll kind of leave that one alone. And then, serving on a corporate board, we've seen it with some of our clients over the years that You know, everybody's, you know, able to do what they want to do with their own time, but in some cases, certain companies are able to sort of guide their leadership and, you know, kind of mid-level managers towards some of the opportunities out there to serve on a board that might align a little bit with your company's vision for, you know, corporate social responsibility, and again, to advance your own brand. So that is something you could look into, is, you know, without mandating someone, you can provide some context to why it might be better to serve on this board than another one.
Yeah. By the way, we welcome questions or comments along the way, so that this is more of a dialogue than a monologue. I know there's time at the end for questions, but feel free, as we're presenting this information, to stop us and ask anything about what we've said so far that deserves a question or comment. All right, well, let's look at some statistics then.
Sure, I'll look at this first, yeah.
Go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, so some of these are self-explanatory. Some will take a little bit more digging in. Philanthropic efforts, pretty obvious. You know, your company or organization has a certain amount of dollars that you can, you know, donate to groups that align with your core mission and vision and brand. You know, a check writing, or even, you know, donation of goods and services to help those folks, whatever it might be, to gift to that company or to that nonprofit or whoever it might be, to help them out. Same goes with volunteer activities. You know, this is the giving of your time. This one, I would say, is the most scalable for any size company. You don't have to have, you know, 6,000 employees. You can have 10 employees, but, you know, a concerted effort to look out into the community, see where you can help, and then, you know, doing group activities to not only help that group, but also, you know, a big part of this, as we'll talk about throughout, is, you know, helping your own employees really engage with your company, you know, learn more about each other, the brand, just feel good about what they're doing on behalf of the company that they're working for. Many times, you know, groups, you know, volunteer groups within companies can be a beast in their own to manage, but, you know, for those corporate level folks out there, you know, it takes a, you know, strategy of its own for volunteerism and requests you're getting. But in the end, I think you'll find that the more your employees are able to engage in volunteer activities, the more they're getting out of the company, and you'll get some, you know, as we'll show later, a little bit more productivity out of those folks. You want to handle this provision?
Yeah, so we've all heard about time, treasure, and talents, and the first three really are captured in that. As Brian said, giving of money, giving of one's time, and then, you know, the giving of products, depending on what kind of business you are, or services, if you're a service-oriented company. And so those are all, you know, excellent ways to give back. And in fact, programming, ongoing programming, can be developed, campaigns, initiatives, projects that are ongoing. And as we'll discuss here this afternoon, the ongoing part is important, because ultimately, as businesses, we're going to be measured by our behavior, and a lot of that report card that we get back from the marketplace is going to be consistency. So that's why we said a minute ago that one-off kinds of efforts aren't quite as effective. Company diversity and work practices. You remember when we looked at the definition, we talked about self-regulation. And so this is from the inside out. When we talk about social responsibility, how is the company even, you know, set up and managed? Is it diverse? You know, gender, ethnicity, age, able-bodied, disabled, just a good mix of diverse human resources. And then how are they being managed? How are they being engaged? What are the core values that really cause a company to operate on a week in and week out basis? All of this needs to be very well thought out. And even before you get to some of the external kinds of programming, number 4 is going to be an area where your employees are going to decide for themselves just how responsible you really are as a business relative to your work practices and your behavior. Number 5.
I'm going to jump back real quick, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Back real quick, just to kind of put this context of the times we're living into right now. For number 3 on the provision of products and services. I mean, I think more than ever, you're seeing companies and organizations, pivot, is the big word right now, to whatever goods and services they're normally providing the general public. Now they're utilizing those talents and skills and services that they do offer to provide various things for, again, healthcare, systems, but also nonprofits and the whole 9 yards. So it's been real heartwarming, kind of cool to see folks, really selflessly doing that. But in the back of all this is a little bit of, we're trying to make sure that our company is pitching in here to help where we can. So all for the good of man, of course, but beyond COVID-19 and whatnot, there are some pieces that I think will emerge, and and people, companies might see, okay, that felt good, and our employees felt good about doing that for X nonprofit or organization. So that's kind of that might be the seed for a CSR plan at a company that didn't have one before. So that's kind of neat to see that coming to fruition. And then down to the company diversity piece. I'll share some anecdotal information, but we have had numerous clients over the years create internal employee networking groups. So this accomplishes numerous things on the CSR plan, as from an internal employee engagement standpoint, whether it's a Latino group or LGBTQ group or African American group or women in engineering or whatever that might be, those internal groups that are spearheaded by employees give them a sense of ownership over something within the company. Again, this is a scalable one where it could, if you're at a company of 100 or 50, you could still have a small group where you get together, for social gatherings, or many times I've seen, actual, volunteer efforts. I spent a lot of time working with Arizona Public Service, our utility company here in Arizona, and they, created a veterans networking group. So a lot of their efforts were putting forth effort, to build up veterans within the company, but also help veteran groups outside of the company. So that's one example of it, but it's shown some real great efficacy in employee retention, general feeling about the company overall, and then also as a recruitment tool. People see that, if I'm going to come work at, X company, they care about their employees enough to allow them to stand up these groups, to kind of show the diversity, build up, the like-minded people within those companies to, again, be a little bit more productive, and also just enjoy working with one another.
That last one on the list is maybe a little bit more finite than the other categories. But when you think about social responsibility, it's hard to not address environmental initiatives and really just the environment as a whole. The world we're living in today is very public facing, and just about everything we do as a business is seen and shared outside the walls of our business. So how we do our business and how it probably does affect the environment, whether it's polluting the air or the water, or maybe we're just talking about conservation kinds of issues. These are key areas for many, many companies, certainly all of those in the manufacturing space, but even others outside, because it can be something as simple as just how you recycle materials, reuse things, repurpose things. And again, employees and customers are going to be watching and evaluating behaviors that way. Some of the big brands that we all are well aware of, a Starbucks or a Nike, they've literally changed under some public pressures over the years, how they grow and harvest coffee beans, how they manufacture garments and shoes, because they're being held accountable for how they treat the environment. But don't think on global scales. It can also happen right inside the four walls of your business relative to day in and day out policies and operating procedures. All right, now some stats.
Not yet.
No?
Ahead of yourself.
I'm a little anxious.
Yep. Oh, there you go.
Oh, there they are. So it's true that, and I mentioned early on that not everybody is aware of what CSR is, and certainly why it matters. So if there are those of you on this webinar that are thinking, how am I going to sell this into the C-suite? How am I going to get the boss to understand that this is important and that there's an ROI to it? Let's take a look at some of these compelling statistics. The first one, 3/4 of employees say that they value their company's reputation more than a higher salary. Said differently, they would prefer that their company's reputation improve and be one that is respected in their community, in the marketplace, over having a bump in the salary. And there's lots of research, about all of this and why people, stay or leave a company. 15% increase in productivity from employees who believe in and are inspired by their company. Inspired by what? Being socially responsible, and that being seen and determined by consistent activities and behavior. That ought to be of interest to any business owner relative to how important. I mean, extrapolate the 15% over a year, and we're probably talking about gaining an entire month, a month's worth of productivity if people are really working at it instead of dragging their feet. The next one's huge. 50% decrease in employee turnover at companies where there is a culture of social responsibility. We all know how expensive it is to train employees and get them in place at full levels of productivity, and then to lose them, the downtime, the cost of finding a replacement, retraining. So that's a big one. And then finally, companies that that practice CSR and they live it out actually spend less money when it comes to marketing themselves, and that has to do with the next slide. But before we go there, make note that some of these numbers do actually increase when we're talking about millennials or Generation Z, all of which is to say that They are even more heartfelt about some of these things and determine that they will only work for a company that behaves in a consistently responsible manner.
And before we go to the next slide too, I mean, I think a valid point on this slide specifically is that, you know, we're not talking about external audiences here at all yet. This is all employee-based, feeling good about where they're working. And as, you know, many people have said, you know, your best advertiser is your employee. So if they're feeling good about what you're doing at their company and, you know, sharing it on social media or, you know, to external audiences, or just, you know, talking to their neighbors, you know, about, you know, X project that they're involved in because, you know, it's coming through their company. It's all just kind of word of mouth, grassroots, you know, advertising and kind of PR for your company. So kind of keep that in mind throughout this, and we'll dig in a little bit more about external versus internal audiences.
Yeah, so if we just talked about the impact on internal audiences, let's see how CSR impacts the consumer. Customer loyalty increases 15% when they witness organizations that are socially responsible. 42% of consumers will leave a brand, a company, and stop doing business with them if they're not aligned with their own personal values and beliefs. So it's not always easy to know what your customers' values or beliefs are. Of course, that's where research can come in, archival research or primary research, and it's good to know certainly what your target audience is thinking. But the fact of the matter is, if there's a disconnect there, almost 50% of people will say, gee, like your product fine, it's lived up to what you say it's supposed to do for me, but don't like you as a company necessarily, and you don't behave in a way that aligns with me personally. 55% of consumers will actually pay more. That's interesting, and speaks a little bit to the idea that you may not need to spend as much money on marketing if your consumers are paying full value or even more, and that's increasing, your bottom line profitability. We'll get into some examples of where that's actually played itself out here in a minute. 16% overall increase in profitability, again, for companies that practice this on an ongoing basis. And that ties to the 55% that, again, aren't being frugal with companies that they respect. And then this last one's more in the macro. It should catch any business owner's attention. And it has to do with, just the value of the company. Over a 10-year period, 175% increase in brand value. Now, if you're a public company, that's stock prices as measured by, most public companies. If you're a private company, it can just be book value. But either way, brand valuation is very important, and it goes way up for companies that are consistently, walking the talk and living out their core values of being socially responsible. Now, if we probably, had only one slide, it might be this one. And I'd hope that this is a key takeaway for everybody participating this afternoon. It's kind of thing one and thing two of the true mandatory, principles of CSR, the CSR essentials, if you will. To be truly effective, CSR programs must be two things: well administered and well communicated. And we've got so much verbiage up on the slide here that we want to have it really be literal in terms of our understanding. What does well administered means? It means that all the efforts, whatever it is that a company goes about doing with their CSR programming, that they're focused around an issue or program that links to a company's purpose, products, or industry. And that's what we mean when we talk about alignment. Well administered, the programming truly is aligned with what the business does day in and day out, or what they believe in relative to their core values. And so it could be, you know, any number of different things, but we show some examples there.
And yeah, and you know, on the well-administered side of things too, you know, it is, you know, sitting down and really developing some strategy. And again, I've seen some clients develop, you know, for those companies that are a little bit, have more capability to be more philanthropic and have more pool of money maybe to give on the more corporate side. You know, you don't have to have everything anchored to one initiative, but that's kind of the goal, is to have everything kind of bleed through that one initiative. Like up here we said, you know, STEM programming to support workforce development, whether if you're in IT or any sort of, you know, organization that utilizes science, technology, engineering, and math. It's, you know, focuses good on that, you know, to get education dollars out there to help with those sort of programs. Youth development, Boys and Girls Club has STEM programming, you know, scholarships, financial literacy, all these hard skills. So kind of just finding that niche, because, you know, not all businesses might have that direct tie to a specific initiative through a nonprofit, but there's always a way to, you know, put your eggs where you want them and just stick to that throughout.
So thing two, being well communicated. I think we've all heard about that parable of, you know, lighting a candle or turning on a light and putting it under a, you know, a lampshade or shielding it in some way. All these great CSR programs, well administered, well aligned, are wonderful, but if nobody knows about them, it could be all for naught. Certainly, it will have impact on the employees that have been involved in the programs, and that's wonderful and very important, as we've already suggested. But externally, in terms of the marketplace and your customers and your prospects, knowing about your activities and all the good that you're doing, they need to know about it. And so these two things are just critically important. One without the other, and there's a disconnect. And you know, that even goes so far as to say sometimes things are well communicated or aggressively pushed out, but the programming may not live up to all that is being promoted or talked about. It may be kind of half-baked. And so Brian made a good comment earlier. If your employees are going to be your goodwill ambassadors and the conduit to share all that's going on with the marketplace, the programming you know, must be solid and must live up to it.
Yeah, and additionally, I mean, this is where, you know, we as PR professionals kind of live to flesh out a public relations strategy, is, you know, talking about your core business, your services, your products. This is certainly weighs heavy in that strategy of being able to tell those stories that integrate you with different organizations out there around whatever your passion might be. You know, and some will ask, well, why are we doing something nice just to get coverage? And that's kind of where it's you can weigh it different ways, because many times what we'll do is, you know, we'll work with that organization that is you know, benefiting from you know, kindness from a company, to tell their story, to help them out further with, whether it's donations or dollars. So you kind of look at it various ways, but there's always some good strategy within that to tell those really effective stories about, why your company is engaging with another organization to help the community overall. So that's kind of where, PR strategy and CSR come together for external audiences. But again, you can't forget about your internal audiences, especially for, larger companies that, don't have that word of mouth necessarily of like, oh, did you see what we did last week for X organization? So sharing on your intranet or internal newsletters, whatever that might be, just in meetings, if you're a smaller company, to make sure that, all hands meetings, you're sharing, what the company did over the last month to benefit the community. So all those kind of things to keep in mind of making sure that people know, because it's not self-serving, it's advancing your brand and your reputation. And I'll cue this up. So this is an example, just a local client, Arizona Federal Credit Union, that we have. And it's an example of a one-time effort, as Arizona Federal does do a lot in the community for financial literacy for youth and whatnot. But within the COVID-19 pandemic here, they wanted to do something nice for healthcare professionals and also involve a lot of their employees to hand out these gifts to the folks. So we'll just play this short video so you can kind of just get an idea of what we're looking at here.
Today, what about the moms who are working on the front lines today? Moms at Valley Health Medical Center got a special surprise on the way into or out of work. This was so cool to see. Arizona Federal Credit Union thanking healthcare heroes and those moms out there by bringing them flowers and cookies during their shift change. The local credit union wanted to do something special to show their appreciation. So you're going in, Jamie, you're going to be away from the kids for what, 13, 14 hours. And what a nice.
So again, it's an example of, CSR at a very basic level, but, from those photos, the video we took from there, they shared that with their employees who aren't able to do as much right now because of all the, restrictions. But, there was some, there's about five employees at each location of 3. So they were able to share the photos and their sentiments about, how they were helping these healthcare heroes kind of have a nice Mother's Day. So a nice feel-good story, but something that we were able to get out there to share with the masses through some traditional earned media.
Okay, because alignment is so important and we've touched on it, we just wanted to give you some quick snapshots. It's impossible for Brian and I to know who all's on this call and what your business is, but we want you to think in terms of what it is that you do day in and day out, what kind of business you are, and how that might align or match up with a nonprofit organization. If you were to go out and start from scratch to create a CSR program, from a strategic standpoint, you're going to think about what you do as a business and think about what naturally might be a need in the community where it aligns. So here in Phoenix, we have a theatrical company called Value Theater, and it's just as it sounds. It's for young people, and they put people on stage and teach them to, or have them, use their talents. They're famous. One of their famous alumni from Value Theater is Emma Stone, who we all know. So if you were a musical instrument company, or you were a clothing company of some kind, you could probably find ways to support Value Theater on an ongoing business by the provision of products or by costuming and things that they would need. If you weren't in those businesses and you were an accounting firm, it probably wouldn't be a way to perfectly align day in and day out until it came to tax season. UMOM is a nonprofit that shelters mothers, domestic violence, and those serious issues, and they're basically a homeless shelter. So similarly, a builder, a contractor, might actually be able to come in and create living spaces for some of these moms and families. We won't go through each one of these. We'll run out of time, but next to the last bullet, a utility company. Brian mentioned Arizona Public Service earlier, our utility company here. Well, they're in a natural position to get involved with any number of different organizations, starting hopefully with youth. Why? To teach them, all about science and technology and engineering and math. And so these are examples of easy and simple alignment that can create programming across the span of a year or years. Now, some specific examples of things that you may be well aware of. Again, we may not have time to go into all of these, but one that hits close to home here for Arizona State University is an initiative that they created with Starbucks several years ago that has been, covered nationally and internationally by the media because of its incredible impact that it's had. Starbucks, one of their core values is education and career opportunities for their partners. And interestingly, that they don't have employees, they call them partners. So that begins to talk about or just kind of suggest the tone and tenor of how they behave as a company. So Starbucks and ASU several years ago created an online educational initiative, and it's called the Starbucks College Achievement Plan. And imagine this, they provide, Starbucks does 100% tuition coverage for full and part-time partners. Now there's some conditions, you have to have worked there a certain amount of time, and the free tuition is after any scholarships or financial aid. But can you imagine how their partners or employees feel about working for Starbucks when they can go back to school or maybe start their higher education for the first time and receive a degree at no cost to themselves? Perfect alignment between two companies that had shared values and incredible opportunities for both companies relative to ASU also extending their brand and being able to catch other students in the net. Another one that I've always been very fond of, we live here in Arizona and the great outdoors, and I guess that applies to most of the BBBs on the meeting here, based on the fact that we're in the West Coast. But great weather, we have a chance to go outdoors, and that's what REI is all about. So they have this community grant program. The employees are actually the key decision makers on where the company's financial resources go, to what groups or organizations that receive their funding, which projects, how much each group gets. And so I think it's wonderful that the employees are actually the decision makers here. The other thing that REI does, perfect alignment with who they are, making products that send people out into the outdoors to be able to, enjoy a hike or to go camping over a weekend. On Black Friday, arguably the largest commercial day of the year relative to sales, they close all their stores. They do that at a significant loss of revenue because if you can't get in, you can't shop. And instead, they tell their employees to go outside. It's a hashtag opt outside. And they, again, walk the talk and are suggesting to their employees and their customers, don't spend time indoors on a beautiful day in November. Go out and use our products to enjoy the outdoors. Perfect alignment because it reinforces the importance of having the right gear, the right product. By the way, every employee that goes to work for REI gets a $300 credit to purchase things that they don't have at the store so that they can, actually live out this value of the great outdoors and using the products for that purpose. Brian, you want to take one of these?
Yeah, just in the interest of time, maybe go to the Tide one. So you'll see in the video that we're going to show real quick next. But and again, this is very a large corporation, Procter & Gamble, who who produces Tide. So throughout all this, I will say that we're giving some high level recognizable brands for you, but keep in mind that this can all be very scaled to your local needs and size of company. But Tide, essentially, I can't remember what disaster it was.
They've gone into communities where there's been floods,
Yeah.
hurricanes, all kinds of different things.
So this one I think is from a couple years ago from the earthquakes and hurricanes in Puerto Rico. But it's a video just kind of showing what they did for the community to help them out in their time of need. And we'll just watch a little bit of it in the interest of time. So again, something pretty high level, but if you think about it from telling it to external audiences or internal audiences, if you're doing a volunteer effort in your area for whatever reason it might be, taking photos and compiling that into a video to tell that to external audiences, because as Ray said earlier, it is important to share because again, it's about internal engagement, it's about external engagement, but it could also be about employee retention and attraction. So if somebody sees that video of your company or your business doing good in the community, that does resonate and says I want to be a part of that brand. So yeah,
just perfect alignment with that. Procter & Gamble in the business of making detergents and other household items, cleaning products and so forth, packaged goods. And so instead of sending a check to the Red Cross, which would have been nice, you can well appreciate the difference here where employees actually going out into these communities along with that vehicle and washing the clothes and handing out product and really making a difference right in the epicenter of the disaster. Well, in summary, we like to just hit on this point over and over and over again, and it's a summarization of all that we've been talking about. The performance and the output of a company, its productivity, its profitability, cannot and will not exceed the belief, the trust, the respect in that company. And it's two-part, as we've already just suggested. The belief from the employees, which can be transformational, and the belief from the consumer in the marketplace, which can have significant impact on the bottom line. A few one-off quotes here from some people that are familiar to us all that just really speak to culture. And we haven't mentioned culture until this point, but suffice it to say that CSR programming, when it is properly put in place and executed and communicated properly, can have incredible impact on the culture of our companies. And we all know how important culture is and what it translates to along the way.
Yeah, and throughout all this, you can see the tie is it's all circular, and not to sound cheesy, but it just kind of, you reap what you sow on many levels, both with the organizations you might be helping out with, your employees feeling more engaged, people out in the world seeing your company doing good things. So it all creates great sentiment. And really gives a sense of purpose for your employees a lot of the times too, just to feel really connected to their business and what they're doing on a day-to-day basis. And as some of the research shows, certainly in the millennial generation is they're resonating with those companies that as Ray said earlier, they'll take a salary cut if they feel connected to their work. So with that, I think we've kind of come to our end, and would love to take some questions if there have been any submitted, Faustine.
Yes, we have one from Marilyn. She states, if you are a nonprofit, would you recommend you work the other way around and work to connect with a for-profit organization?
So I would say yes. In fact, there are probably a lot of companies that, if they don't have this kind of strategy in place, if you reach out to them and give them options, especially ones that aren't always tied to huge dollars. And again, it's all scalable depending on what you're looking at. But sometimes that's almost a favor to some of the corporations to say, hey, we have this program, and whether they respond, that's great. But I know for a fact that there's been plenty of times where a nonprofit has reached out to a company and said, hey, we have this specific program. Would you be interested in getting some volunteers over, get a foot in the door kind of that way, to get some low level engagement. And then just like anything else, foot in the door and kind of grow that relationship. And, if then it's hey, we need we're looking for grants to keep this program going and have you involved on a volunteer basis, then it's a win-win. But I would suggest reaching out to companies that you think some of your, whatever your focus in your nonprofit is, aligns with their brand.
Yeah, it's a great question, and it absolutely works in reverse order. So just, if you're the U Mom or the Valley Youth Theater, whatever it is that your nonprofit organization exists to do, just think about the kinds of businesses that provide the products and services that could benefit you. And as Brian is suggesting, start with the people that are, writing checks to you now, and think about how they can up their game to actually provide, again, products and services as well as the financial aid, so that it truly creates a 360-degree impact on your organization. And then as both organizations, the for-profit and you, the nonprofit, are communicating this out, just think about the impact it could have in terms of attracting, additional participants. I like to say it's about casting a wide net and catching more fish.
Yeah, and I'll build on that. That's always been one thing that I've tried to do on a earned media standpoint, is trying to tell that story with intent to get the nonprofit additional donations or exposure, so they can get more people to help them out.
Great, thank you. So we have a question, doesn't say who it's from, but what are some tips if you're trying to establish a relationship with for-profit organizations, but they are already giving to your competitors, especially in the case if your nonprofit is having a greater impact than organizations they may be partnering with already? Any tips would be beneficial.
That is a tough question, actually, because it's there's a lot of competition out there for dollars, as we all know, and sometimes this might actually go back to what Ray said very early on, is sometimes there's a relationship that's built from a CEO or a C-level pet project, quote unquote, that might be hard to shake, but I think your best bet is to just, as much as you can, share statistics and kind of a soft ask of, when even saying hat in hand, like we do understand that you're supporting this other nonprofit, but we would love your support, and here's why we want your support, and not to throw mud on anyone, but maybe try to show what your organization might be doing a little bit better. That is a very tough question, though, because there are certain organizations that will only fund one nonprofit in the one category. With that said, there are many corporations that will fund numerous ones. Say, like we were talking about earlier, like if you have STEM programming that you want to get involved with, I know for a fact that you could have 5 different entities receiving funds to support that. So if you have a real niche in the marketplace, that might be tougher. But if it's something that's more a little more broad, you might have better luck.
I'd come at it this way. My knee-jerk reaction to the question was, if they're already working with one of your competitors, just think in terms of going after one of their competitors. So if you're in the need of a construction company, or you think you have ideas for how you can align with a builder to do some things on an ongoing basis, and builder A is already dating another nonprofit, then just go to builder B. Now, if builder A is one that you really covet, and for reasons that don't matter, today in this discussion, you just have to have them, then roll up your sleeves and take a look, get to know them better as a company. What are their core values? And is that other nonprofit truly activating with them, partnering with them in a way that's activating on those core values and what that company stands for? And if they're not, you may have an opportunity to just kind of do an end around and say, gee, we'd like to introduce ourselves, and we understand you're working with another NPO, but we think we can bring more to the table based on who we are and what we've come to learn what you're all about.
Great, thank you. We have a question from Paul. How would you recommend motivating my employees to take part of CSR? I'm a small painting company and my employees never seem interested even though I pay them to volunteer with me.
So good question, Paul. And what's that adage? You can drag a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. And so I'm glad you bring that up, because what we didn't talk a lot about this last hour is employee alignment and buy-in, from the employees, and how to go about that. I would suggest that you take your own survey of your people and ask them, what are you interested in? What is really important to you? And maybe it's something in their personal life or at home because of some situation or condition within their family. Maybe they have a child with autism, or some other learning disability. By asking what they really value, what's important to them, you're not going to hear the same thing from every employee, but at some point, there may be kind of a democratic vote based on, 3 things that start to emerge that were mentioned by all of your employees. And it kind of gets back to that REI example where they're driving the bus and they're deciding where, REI's resources are going to. And I can promise you this, if it's something that they're interested in, if the employees have said, gosh, this matches up with our personal values and beliefs, they're going to be enthusiastic brand warriors on behalf of your painting company to go out there and kick up some dust.
And to build on that too, and I know we're a little bit over here, but and you might already do this, Paul, but in asking for feedback from your employees, that also garners a little bit of transparency that you want to see them, you want to see what they want to do to spend their needed time off the clock. So I do like the survey idea, and that's something we've seen before. So trying to get them engaged, it's hard because everybody has limited time and families and whatnot. But trying to figure out, and maybe it's not through a specific organization, but if there's a one-off painting project, for instance, that you're helping out a family that is in desperate need of an exterior paint job or something like that to help them advance in their life. So I'll stop there, but that I think that's just trying to get engagement from them, just asking for their feedback is a huge thing.
Great, thank you so much. So that's all the questions that we have that I can see that have been submitted. So thank you for your time, Brian and Ray, for sharing this information about CSR. Definitely organizations should definitely get on board with this. It's a great foundation to excel your business and to motivate employees. It's definitely something that BB is doing with our Main Street Matters grant as well. So, but thank you both for spending time sharing this information with us. The webinar is recorded, so it will be available on events.bbcommunity.org. But thank you for attending, everyone. Please stay safe out there and have a great day.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.